Wake up, Twins territory, and welcome back after a hiatus there for a couple of weeks to a condensed version, 30-minute version of Hangout and Talk Twins. We're going to just preview Thursday's deadline to add players to the 40-man roster. Uh, as we always do, it's myself and Seth Stowe. Seth, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. I'm really wondering if we can keep this to a half an hour, or if we're just going to ramble, but we'll see what happens.
We're not going to ramble. We got it scripted out, so we get a half hour to talk, and then I'm pulling the plug at a half hour. So basically, what we need to talk about is we need to look at where the Twins are right now. They are at 36 guys on their 40-man roster, and then they can add players to that roster in advance of the Rule 5 draft, which happens early in December. Essentially, any high school player that's been out of school for 5 years and any college player that's been out of school for 4 years needs to be added to the 40-man to protect them from being plucked by another organization. So the Twins sit at 36 players. Seth, what are you doing on Thursday?
Boy, other than working and taking phone calls at work all day, I'll be paying a lot of attention to who the Twins add to the Rule 5 draft and what other transactions, meaning potentially DFAs or lost players on waiver claims, are also happening as a result of it.
Okay, so tell me your plan. You're in the driver's seat.
Oh, well, I think they're going to create a little bit more room, but I think, as I wrote today at Twins Daily, there's three givens, and we've talked about that, and we've known that for a long time. Miguel Sano, Eddie Rosario, and Alex Meyer are givens. Even with the last year for Rosario, with the last year for Sano, the 50-game suspension and the struggles of Rosario, and Alex Meyer not getting to the big leagues, they're all givens. So the question becomes, how many other guys are they going to add? As I kind of highlighted a little bit today, I think Sean Gilmartin's a guy, even though his numbers don't necessarily stand out, I think the fact that he was
And naturally, who knows where Seth went?
and possibly five, and I think that fifth guy could be infielder Levi Michael. I know people may disagree with that because of the struggles and his injuries, but I'm also thinking he showed just enough last year at just enough of a high level that someone could stash him as a 25th man on the roster, let him play some defense, play in blowouts, pinch run, things like that, and then let him develop further. So, that's another guy. So I think there will be, and I just said I think there will be four, but I'm thinking there's going to be five, and I'll say Miguel Sano, Eddie Rosario, Alex Meyer, Sean Gilmartin, and I'll say Levi Michael.
Okay, now from where I was sitting, you cut out there before coming back in. You cut out while you were talking about Gilmartin. So I'm not sure if that'll make it through when we rip our audio or not. But then you recapped at the end. So if you heard what I heard, you at least got Seth's final take on things. For me, I put Meyer, Rosario, and Sano as absolute adds, and I would also add Gilmartin. For me, he was the only guy in the category. I just made four categories: 100%, 75%, 50-50, and then a bunch of other guys. And Gilmartin was my only one at 75%. If I'm personally doing the adding, I'm also going to make room to add Levi Michael, as you mentioned, Nico Goodrum, and Mark Hamburger. I would look to add those seven. But then we do get into a kind of a roster crunch. So, where do you sit on the two guys that I'm adding that you are not adding? How do you feel about those two individuals, Nico Goodrum and Mark Hamburger?
Well, Nico Goodrum would be all about tools and all about upside. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Goodrum's all about tools and upside. He's almost 23, and it hasn't necessarily come together yet. But if you're going to add him, it's going to be a few years. It's not like adding Max Kepler or Jorge Polanco when they're 19 and giving them 3 years to move up, Goodrum's going to have to take a big step forward next year if you think he can. It's definitely someone to add. A second-round pick, I think it might be worth it. As for Hamburger, I mean, he's one of those guys that they did sign right away, kept him from becoming a free agent. He wants to be here, but he's got the major league background. He's kind of cleaned things around, and I think that's big in the industry per se. I would add one other name that we talked a little bit about pre-show that might have a chance, and it's because he could fit into a big league bullpen right now as a loogie or a left-handed one-out guy, and that's Ryan O'Rourke. If you look at his overall numbers, I don't think they look tremendous, but if you just look at his numbers against left-handers, he could have a role on a big league roster. So I'm going to disagree. I don't think the guys you mentioned will get added, and I don't think O'Rourke will, but it does seem like every year there's one guy that we all kind of look at and say, that's surprising. And one of those guys could be it.
Right. I think the other name that we have not mentioned yet is Jason Adam, who came from the Royals in the Willingham deal, and the Twins have their plans to convert him back to a starter. Played in the Arizona Fall League, wasn't great, but he's just that's a type of acquisition the Twins would make, and then not just give the guy away. Not necessarily that he would get drafted, but not protect him. And as you mentioned, there's guys that leave us shaking our head when they do this on Thursday. He would fit in that category. Just some other guys that I wrote down. Jason Wheeler, obviously, is a guy that you had mentioned too in your article. Alex Wimmers, Brett Lee, and then the other name, you had talked about O'Rourke and being left-handed, and that that's kind of a big deal. With left-handed guys just always getting another chance. Corey Williams was a guy that had a good year in low A and then high A, and then I think he actually made it up to double A before having some elbow issues. Missed all of last year. Should come back healthy. It's kind of hard to draft those guys, but when you really could really take another redshirt year and then try to keep him the following year, I put him at less than 10%, but just a name because he's left-handed and does some things could be considered. But I think really the focus is on those three for sure. Gil Martin is kind of a probable add, and then Levi Michael, and then Nico Goodrum. Really, for me, one or the other. We had talked pre-show about the additions that the Twins have made since the end of the season, and with minor league free agents, and really it's been the re-addition of guys that they've had. James Beresford, Eric Ferris, Tony Thomas, all middle infield guys, and then the Red Wings announced today that they signed 2 other middle infield guys, and that just, to me, was a signal that, hey, maybe this is kind of a backup plan. Levi Michael fits in somewhere, potentially double A, maybe could get some time at shortstop, where, depending on where Polanco is, and Goodrum fits in maybe at third base, but also played some shortstop. You bring these other guys in, and it's really for depth. And if you lose a guy, for me that was just kind of a, hey, maybe the Twins are saying, we like these guys, we don't want to use a spot on them. If we lose them, we have other guys in the pipeline to replace them. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's why I that would have me leaning, could have me leaning no towards Michael and Goodrum, and those are 3 guys, including Hamburger, that I wasn't sure on. 50-50 for me, but what's your take on that?
I mean, I think you make a good point. I mean, and those that are listening and didn't see it today, we did mention it at Twins Daily too. The Twins signed minor league infielders, a 27-year-old named Argenis Diaz, who actually had a cup of coffee with the Pirates in 2010, but has been in AAA like the last 6 years, and Hector Meneses, who's only 23. He's been in the Red Sox organization since signing as a 16-year-old. Hasn't hit much at all. These guys are probably double-A types of depth. And when we talk about the guys that'll be at double-A, they're probably not going to be starters. But I like your thought that they're probably being brought in, and guys like Beresford brought back, in part in case they lose Michael or Goodrum or someone else in the Rule 5 draft. You mentioned Jason Wheeler. I should have spent more time with him. It's interesting how all of these things that happen with other organizations affect how we think. Today when I saw that left-handed reliever Zach Duke who was a failed starter and struggled in becoming a bullpen guy, but did have a really good year last year in Milwaukee. When he signed for 3 years and $15 million, it made me start thinking, you know what, they should take any lefties. That's why I think Ryan O'Rourke makes some sense. I think Jason Wheeler makes a lot of sense, especially if you believe that the 6'8 lefty can start throwing harder and consistently hitting 94 instead of occasionally hitting 94. And Sean Gilmartin becomes even more obvious. So, correlating what's going on in the industry as a whole to what's going on with the Twins is kind of fun, and we're probably overthinking it a little bit, but at the end of the day, they've got a tough decision. And, for instance, Jeremy, you said they're going to add 7 guys, which means they're going to have to drop 2 or 3, if not more, off of the 40-man roster just to get there. So who are you thinking those guys could be?
Well, that was kind of the other exercise that I had done today. And for me, adding Gilmartin and taking off Aaron Thompson just made a lot of sense. That's a spot that could easily be achieved. Aaron Thompson is a guy that would go unclaimed and go unselected. Chris Colabello, who I know there's been conversations internationally with him going potentially overseas. I like the story, and if he remains, great. But there's depth at first base. We know that he can't really play the outfield, especially if they're in the market for an outfielder. That he becomes expendable. I would make that switch. I would drop Thompson for Gilmartin, and if I was going to add Levi Michael, I would drop Colabello. The next one is and this one you may not agree with. I would drop Herman. I'd drop Chris Herman, and with that spot, I would re-sign Dan Rolfing, who's a minor league free agent, and I would add Nico Goodrum. And then finally, if I did decide I want Hamburger, I would drop either Oliveros or Octor. And that one's a little more, I'm kind of on the fence about that one because they're all right-handed guys. I think Hamburger has a better chance to start, meaning he has a chance to start when the other 2 guys don't. But Gilmartin could take Thompson's place. That would still leave 1 spot on the 40-man, so 35, 36 to 35 plus 4. You'd have 1 spot. But to add Michael or Goodrum, I'd look at dropping Colabello or Herman, so I'm doing hitter for hitter. And then if they don't add Hamburger and keep Oliveros and Octor, I'm fine with that. I just think Hamburger probably, 6 1, half dozen of the other. What move or which moves, if any, would you make to add room or make room on the 40-man?
Well, I'll give 2, and I actually agree with you. Aaron Thompson can be dropped, in my opinion, and Gilmartin for his spot, however you want to do that. And I kind of agree with the Chris Herman decision, since they're not using him as a catcher anyway. I'd like to see Rolfing come back. He hasn't signed yet, which tells me he's probably listening to a lot of offers, potentially because of his versatility and his ability to catch. Good for him. The other question I would have for you, Jeremy, is when do the Twins and other teams have to decide on whether or not they're going to tender a contract? Because we've talked a little bit about a couple of guys that are arbitration eligible this year. When do they have to decide? And is that this week? Because there's a couple of guys that I'd take off knowing that's the direction we're going.
To my understanding, that's something that doesn't have to be decided until early December. The deadline for Thursday is strictly for players under like a minor league contract that have to be added. Your 40-man has to be set for players that are under contract. So minor league free agents, other free agents don't have to be set. You can add and remove guys, except for guys that you've added you can't remove. So to my understanding, the guys that, the non-tender candidates that we talk about, that's a deadline that I believe is early December, and I haven't double-checked that date. But those guys could be removed after the roster set. Simply for Thursday, it's guys that weren't on a 40-man that need to be added to a 40-man, and then they've kind of fallen in a special category where they can't be removed from the 40-man until sometime in spring training. Uh, so, as we talk about the arbitration eligible guys, the list of them is Plouffe, Dunsing, Swarzak, Tommy Malone, Eduardo Nunez, Casey Fien, and Jordan Schaefer. So we're gonna shift gears and we're gonna talk about that here for a couple minutes. Where do you fall? I have three categories. I have yeses for tender contracts, maybe tender a contract, and non-tenders. So can you put each one of those guys into a category?
I can, and I'll start with the givens, or whichever you called that one. Trevor Plouffe fits into that category, and Casey Fien fits into that category.
Plouffe and Fien. So you only have two.
That are absolute givens, yes.
Okay. What's your next category?
For me, there's another one that I would think is a given, but I'd put him into there's a chance.
Okay, give it to me.
Well, for me, that's Brian Dunsing. He's only going to make $2.5 million or so. Money's not an issue for the Twins. He's been very good. This last year, he was very good through July, when it seemingly all of the bullpen started to struggle. And he's left-handed and breathing, which means he could potentially have value at the trade deadline, knowing he's a free agent going into the offseason. So, to me, that's an easy decision. To a lot of people, I know it's not.
Yeah. Before we go on, if you're listening and you want to get in on this conversation, go to Twins Daily. There's a 40-man our Hangout discussion, and you can comment. We'll get to those questions here within the next 10 minutes. But right now we're talking about arbitration eligible guys. Seth would definitely offer Plouffe and Fien. I would agree. I have those guys combined for $6 million. Plouffe at $4.75 million, Fien for $1.25 million. And then he says yes to Dunsing. Dunsing was one in my maybe. I actually had two other yeses that I think will be absolutely tendered to contract, and those guys are Tommy Malone, who I have value at about $2.75 million, and Jordan Schaefer at $1,450,000. So if you don't have those guys under your yeses, where do you have Tommy Malone and Jordan Schaefer? And I don't know if Seth can hear me. So the other two guys that I have that are listed that I would non-tender are Anthony Swarzak and Eduardo Nunez. Now, the rationale behind that for me is that Swarzak is a bullpen arm that Trevor May potentially could fit that role. You have the hard throwers like Lester Oliveros and eventually some of the college guys that could fill that role for about a third of the price that Swarzak's getting, and then Eduardo Nunez is definitely expendable from the eyes of if Santana's going to play short, then Escobar can become that utility guy that Nunez kind of tried to be. Nunez played some third. I'd feel much more comfortable with Escobar there. But those would be the two guys that I would not tender a contract to. Let's see if I can get Seth back here.
I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Could you not hear me before? When I was talking, I couldn't get a response from you.
No, my internet's gone out twice in the last 10 minutes, and then it's come back right away, so that's wonderful.
In the non-baseball category of internet, I actually upgraded my internet speed over the weekend, so I'm going to pay about twice as much a month and have 7 times the speed. So
I may need to look into that.
Yeah, because we were maxing out because I have kids that like to watch things on YouTube, and apparently in the high def world, that kills your bandwidth. So 20 megs is what I get, whatever that means. So anyway, I'm non-tendering Swarzak and Nunez. Who are you non-tendering?
I would do the same too. Although I'm starting to think if you're able to send Colabello to either get him through waivers, or you lose him, or he goes to Korea, having Nunez around doesn't hurt. He's going to be cheap, and he can play, whether it's good or not, he can play 5 positions. So I don't think that one's as much of an easy choice as we want to think it is. To me, Swarzak's an easy choice. Schaefer, again, in my opinion, I would probably keep him around as well, because I think what he showed is he can be, at worst, a 4th outfielder with speed and good defense. And Tommy Malone's a guy that I think is going to be given a chance for a rotation spot next year. If not, he is left-handed, and obviously he's better than what we saw last year. He's going to be expensive from an if they had to option him standpoint. He'll be at what, 2.5 million or so. I mean, I think there's some question there just from the standpoint of if they were to bring in a free agent pitcher.
Right.
And yet maybe that's where they have a couple more weeks to make those decisions. If they do bring someone else, maybe they non-tender him. So I think that's why I waver on whether or not to call him a given. Right now I'd say he's a very highly likely, but I think there's enough going on that makes it at least a little bit of a question mark.
The deadline to tender contracts is December 2nd at 11 p.m. So there is time. At this point, I mean, we're not looking at making spots with those guys. The spots would come from the other, kind of the fringe of the 40. We have about 9 minutes left here to roll. Let's just run through some things that happened real quickly in the world of baseball. Last week, maybe it was even 2 weeks ago, Tom Bernanski was announced he was going to return. It was announced that he was coming back as the hitting coach, and we had really talked about that on our last show, that we expected that. The additions so far to the coaching staff are Gene Glynn at third base and Rudy Hernandez, who's moving up from Gulf Coast League to be the assistant hitting coach, and also is from he's Spanish speaking, so kind of killing that bird with the same stone. So the voids that remain are pitching coach, first base coach, bench coach, and bullpen coach. And Doogie had tweeted earlier this evening that the Twins are down to 2 names for pitching coach. One is not Frank Viola. Do you have any guesses on who those 2 guys might be?
I do think that Marty Mason would be an interesting choice, and I would guess he's involved. He was the Rochester pitching coach this last year. He spent a lot of time in the Cardinals organization, which of course makes him intriguing to me and probably a lot of people based on how many pitchers the Cardinals continue to bring up. And I really don't know. I mean, we talked about Carl Willis at the last time, and maybe Bobby Cuellar is still in the picture. We don't. I mean, it's really, there's not been anything leaked about candidates or anything, which is kind of frustrating for us. To kind of go back to the other hires, we did talk about Tom Bernanski most likely being the first one named as the coach, and I think we were right there. I know we've been saying, or at least I've been saying, that I thought Glynn was the easy choice for third base coach, since he did that in the major leagues for various teams over about a decade of time. And Rudy Hernandez was a name we really hadn't talked about. He was the assistant hitting coach in the Gulf Coast League, but contrary to what another podcast of the Twins said, he has been a hitting coach pretty much all the way through the system. He was the hitting coach in New Britain before Tom Bernanski got that job, and he's been in Fort Myers, and he's been in the GCL. He's been everywhere. And not only is he from Venezuela, but he has literally worked with pretty much everyone that's come through the minor leagues. And a lot of the people I've talked to just really find him great to work with, that he knows his stuff. So, I mean, when you're talking about an assistant hitting coach, I don't mind that voice staying from within, because I think his role is going to be mentor. It's going to be liaison. It's going to be a lot of those things. And I think having a guy that people are truly comfortable with doing that is a good thing. So I hadn't thought of him, but I think that's a really good hire.
Yeah, Seth, your internet is causing problems again. So, but again, I mean, I think that's like Air Canada or whatever you call that internet in your neck of the woods. We're at about 5 minutes left. There were some other things that have happened. I'm just going to run through those real quick, and then hopefully by the time I get through with those things, Seth will have some questions that he can answer. We have some questions that Seth can answer. Hopefully we'll be able to hear him real well. Rumor has it that Pablo Sandoval is very infatuated with the Red Sox, and the Red Sox are infatuated with Pablo. And one thing that I had heard earlier this year was the possibility that if Sandoval leaves the Giants, that the Giants might be interested in Trevor Plouffe. And obviously, there's the opportunity for Miguel Sano to play third base. Terry Ryan had said he could maybe play the outfield. Sano's not there yet, but with Escobar potentially being that guy, Plouffe has value. He's a good player, and I don't know if they would look to trade him, but at some point you're going to have two guys. You're going to have more guys than you have spots in the lineup. So, he's from about 5 hours south of San Francisco down the coast, and that would be an opportunity to go home. So that's just something worth watching. Obviously, the Jason Hayward for Shelby Miller deal made some waves yesterday. The Cardinals acting pretty swiftly in filling that hole in the outfield. Russell Martin signed for 5 years and $82 million. I believe that Brandon Warren now needs to drive a long way north to cash in on some Chipotle that Seth owes him. And Seth has been infatuated almost as much as Sandoval is with the Red Sox in a skinny little outfielder that can't hit real well but runs fast, and that's Peter Borges. So Seth, in 1 minute, tell me why you love Peter Borges so much.
I have zero interest in Peter Borges. I just made the comment after that trade that when that happened, my initial thought is that the Twins are going to go after Peter Borges because the Cardinals have plenty of outfielders, and Borges just seems like the type that the Twins like. That said, he's very fast and he's very good defensively, but he can't hit. And frankly, you have a guy already who's younger than him, can't really hit, but gets on base really well and is also fast. And although he's not as good an outfielder as Borges, in Aaron Hicks, you've got a pretty decent outfielder that's, in my mind, just as good than the expensive Borges. So I have no interest in it. It would not surprise me if the Twins made a deal that direction.
Gotcha. Okay, we got 3 minutes to answer some questions. Listener question from Kendall. If young pitchers generally take a beating with their first taste of the MLB, why is there so much clamor for a free agent? I want May to turn it around. I want Meyer to take his lumps if he has to. I don't want someone has never been blocking Barrios from knocking down the door. If they can do it in 2015, great. If not, should they be all better in 2016? See what all the prospects done. That's not a question. Well, I guess it is. Why is there so much clamor for a free agent? Why is there clamor for a free agent, Seth?
Well, I think it's because people want things that are different. They want change after all of this time. I want Trevor May just to be handed the job out of spring training because I do think that he turned it around after his first 3 starts. Just look at his walk to strikeout rate. The first 3 starts, compare it to his last 7. To me, he's made the change. He can throw strikes. He can get strikeouts. He's going to walk a few, but he's made enough of a change that I give him a job. I want Alex Meyer to take his lumps. As much as I've heard a lot of people talking about how they think he'll be a bullpen guy, I'd rather see him get an opportunity as a starter and see what happens. Worst thing that happens is he becomes a reliever later, but I'd certainly, with his stuff, give it a try. That said, I do think that, for me, and I think you'd agree, Jeremy, if they're going to get a free agent starting pitcher, it needs to either be someone who's a clear given, so to speak, if there were such a thing with free agent pitchers, meaning, they're more than just a 3, 4, 5. They're probably a number 2, and I think Justin Masterson fits into that category after a bad year, so he becomes the reclamation project side of it.
Yes.
So that would also be Brett Anderson. So, I mean, people are clamoring for it because they want change. They want people that are different. I personally prefer the other direction of going with the young guys.
Right, and for me, I really like Masterson, but if there's not an opportunity to get him, I'm not cool with signing junk like Jason Hamill. That just doesn't do it for me.
Yeah, I agree.
Next question. Would a package of Plouffe, Vargas, and Gonsalves get you in the door for Tyson Ross? That's from Terry Anderson.
It should.
It probably would, yeah.
It should get you the deal.
Yeah, and I don't know if I would
give up that much.
Right. I don't know if I would be willing to make that deal. God dang, Vargas would be the hardest one of those 3 for me to part with right now. I like Gonsalves a lot. He's from that area. That'd probably get the deal done. I don't know that I would make that deal right now, though. given that Sano's not ready, but jeepers. I like the thought of it, and I do like Tyson Ross, but someone did point out to me on Twitter that stay away from National League pitchers, especially ones that pitched in Petco. Last question that we had.
I'd
Actually,
take Andrew Kashner in a second.
yeah, Cashner has been not real healthy though.
Right.
So one more question here. This came from Jonathan Curry on Google. Am I wrong to care way more about the 40-man spring training stats in the April, May, AA, and AAA box scores than free agency? Is he wrong, Seth?
What's the question?
Is he wrong? Is it wrong that he cares more about the 40-man spring training stats and the April and May AA, AAA box scores than free agency?
No, I do. I care
No.
more about those things as well. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but
You're
if
not wrong.
you're wrong, I'm happily wrong right with you.
Right. I think what Seth is saying is if loving that is wrong, he don't want to be right.
That's right.
And lastly, this is also from I believe from Terry. Yeah, this is from Terry on Twins Daily. If a player's on the 40-man roster is non-tender early December, what happens? And can you replace them? You can totally replace them. You can non-tender a guy to make a move. The roster's only set for essentially the players that need to be added. So if the Twins want to sign a free agent, they can take a guy off even if it's between Thursday and the Rule 5 drafts. Let's say this happens hypothetically. Twins add 4 guys. They have 40 guys on their roster. They outright Aaron Thompson the next day. They have 39. They sign Torrey Hunter. They have 40. They outright Chris Colabello. They have 39. They can do that. What they cannot do is add a player that needed to be added to the 40-man and then add him to the roster. You can add guys that aren't under contract to any team. You can't add guys then that aren't under contract. Seth, is there anything you want to say before we sign off tonight?
No, I mean, I just think that I appreciate us doing this. Let us know what you think about the half-hour time limit, even though we're at 32 minutes right now. Trying to keep it lighter and less because we're both rather busy. We're all rather busy. Let us know what you think. Let us know each week what the topics are. Please go to Twins Daily. Leave comments. Leave questions for us to have topics. And we'll kind of go week to week and see what's going on. Are we going to do anything after the 40-man roster is decided?
30 minutes of recap. And both you and I will be doing Talk to Contact quite frequently, probably over the off season too. So we can put ourselves in your ears however you want it.
Hey, can I read off the list of Twins minor leaguers that are back?
Do it.
All right. Eric Ferris was yesterday. Today they announced. Today they announced Eric Ferris. Yesterday they announced James Beresford and B.J. Hermson. A week or so ago it was Nate Hansen, and that goes with Mark Hamburger, Tony Thomas, Danny Ortiz, Reynaldo Rodriguez, Michael Gonzalez, Adrian Salcedo, and Jairo Rodriguez that were signed previously. So they brought a lot of people back.
Last thing to add about that is Deolis Guerra, who came over in the Santana trade, signed with the Pirates to be their newest reclamation project. So,
curious how that'll go.
Yeah, he'll probably win the Cy Young in 2 years. Anyway, that's all for tonight. 33 minutes. It's like a world record. Give us your feedback. Tell us what you like. If you listen to this on iTunes, join the comments on Twins Daily. Seth and I will come back Thursday night for a half hour, and we'll recap the happenings of Thursday afternoon. Anyway, that's all we got. Thanks for hanging out.